Alright, somebody asked me to put together a reply to Venus Projection's latest projection. I use that term without it being light at all. To give a little background, first of all, in this conversation went on for like 6 hours. I was only present for about 4 hours of it. So let me just get into what I've written down here. First of all, in the beginning of your video, you suggest that you had a conversation with me. You did not just talk to me, you talked about a dozen or so people. Many of them interrupted me and you, so it is extremely misleading for you to try and state that you were talking only with me. I know you'd like to try to claim you debated with me and won, but that's not what took place. You debated about 30 people, and it wasn't really fair to you or to me at that point because we were both being interrupted constantly. It was not exactly a good, solid position, which is why I invited you to come on V-RADIO to talk about this instead. Now, that being said, your video takes some very selective clips of the conversation. The conversation went on for about 6 hours. You cherry-picked only whatever points you felt you had a strong argument against and left out the powerful counter-comments that were offered to you, including one that was somebody playing a video of Jock Fresco stating machines do not control people. Let me say that again. Machines will not control people, along with hundreds of other counter-comments that went on during the conversation. You seem to have an obsession with quoting Ray Kurzweil over and over again. I pointed out that even if Jock Fresco or Peter Joseph value some of his insights, it does not mean that they agree with everything he says. And as I repeated to you over and over again, it was not relevant. Because despite the fact that you tried to ignore that The Best That Money Can't Buy has dozens of quotes talking about the importance of individuality, no force or coercion, ever suggested, condoned, or even implied, you always deflect these points saying it doesn't matter. Because of the things it says in Kurzweil's book, so somehow it doesn't matter what it says in The Best That Money Can't Buy. This is where you go off track repeatedly. It does not matter what Ray Kurzweil thinks may happen with technology. In the Venus Project proposed society, such technology would never be employed, contradictory to the tenets of the Venus Project, which mentions the importance of individuality and free choice dozens and dozens of times in The Best That Money Can't Buy. Clearly, your endless repetition of quotes from Kurzweil's book are irrelevant at that point. Ray Kurzweil may believe that is possible. It is not something we would ever support. Nuclear explosions are possible. We don't condone them either. In response to me asking you about whether or not you saw anything in Jock's book about machines rewriting our genetic codes, which was a question once again taken entirely out of context by you, you give a quote out of context. Now let's remember, you are suggesting the possibility that machines will take over our genetic codes whether we want them to or not. That's the straw man, crazy science fiction story you're writing. So you take the quote from the book, and this is the quote: "Reengineering of genetic code may enable us to reduce or eliminate genetic diseases and defects, and even reproduce organs, bones, or tissue that is likely to fail or be subject to disease." Then you leave out some rather pertinent points. Point A, first of all, Jock is not suggesting that machines will be doing this for us or against our will. He is suggesting we may wish to do this to cure diseases or re-engineer things people need to survive. This is already being researched for things like cancer, cloned tissue for burn victims, etc. Point B, the purpose of this re-engineering that will be carried out only on people who are willing to partake of such procedures will be to help them, not control them. If you've ever seen a child afflicted with third-degree burns and maimed for life, you would get an understanding of our motive here. You trying to inject your appeal to fear fallacy is highly dishonest. In the end, it does not matter what Ray Kurzweil says could, and I stress could, be done with this technology. It is not what we plan to do with this technology, or what we would support to be done with this technology. Now, you then take yet another quote out of context. The quote being, "Human beings as we know them will become a modified species," leaving out exactly what Jock is suggesting, which is not that machines will be taking over our minds. We ourselves will seek to enhance ourselves in the same way that people with artificial hearts, hearing aids, etc. do now. You then play a clip where he says people will redesign the human body. Note the people part of that, which is completely contradictory to your absurd science fiction that machines would do this for us. He also says if we don't engineer ourselves, once again pointing out that any such modifications would be done by humans themselves, not by machines. You then cut to another clip of Jock talking about how machines will automate our environmental conditions, telling us what is best for us, as proof that these machines will then be forcing any sort of re-engineering on us. The two things are not the same at all. You literally just run to another quote that is talking about how we'll be automating our environmental systems and that our computers have the information that we do not to best, assist us in that matter. I mean, obviously, we're not the slaves of the machines, so if we don't agree with that, then we can look at why the machine came to that conclusion. This is why he compares it to things like the machines telling you how high you are in your plane, or your thermostat telling you how hot it is in the room. It doesn't mean that the machines are going to demand that we do anything. See, that's where you start to inject your own little fictional parts of it. Okay? Now, you then go on to further lie, claiming that I don't address things you're saying. I address them for 6 hours. Then you bring up, 4 hours. Then you bring up the singularity in reference to Peter Joseph. Your entire point in context was that because Peter Joseph had a picture of the singularity behind him during a lecture, it meant that he agreed with everything Ray Kurzweil said. I notice, conveniently, you left out the more accurate statement about this that Noel Hunter, someone who actually talks to Peter frequently and has known him for years, clarified for you. It's funny that throughout this whole thing you suggest that I am misleading people or being deceptive, but this video is entirely a chop job of you leaving out the points that destroyed your points. So then you take the quote where he says, whatever we have to do to improve ourselves is absolutely viable, once again, completely out of context, leaving the fact that he was suggesting enhancements like hearing aids and glasses out of your quote. You only emphasize and quote mine what is valuable to your paranoid agenda. Peter then points out that it is a testy subject, but you didn't emphasize that quote, again engaging in spin and propaganda of Fox News level, and then you take him saying there's no reason to be afraid of such progress out of context again, when he was describing people using computers to overcome the detrimental effects of Parkinson's disease. I find it interesting that you continue to try and spin obvious indications that we are talking about curing ailments and enhancing performance as something sinister. Now, at 5 minutes and 36 seconds into your video, you accuse me of trying to dodge your question. This is also a blatant lie on your part. At this point in the highly chopped up version of the conversation you have presented, I'm repeating to you over and over again why it is not relevant. Again, it doesn't matter if Ray Kurzweil suggests that machines could rewrite our genetic code. That is not what we will be using machines for. You continue to suggest that it doesn't matter that in Jock's book it says over and over again that individuality is of paramount importance and that the personal choice is of paramount importance. You keep saying that that's not important. It's more important what Ray Kurzweil says, even if it's completely contradictory to what we believe as a movement. You continue to suggest that it doesn't matter that in Jock's book it says this, even though this is exactly why the horror story that you're writing is nothing more than irrelevant fiction. An interesting point I brought up during the conversation that you, of course, did not add to your chop job video is where I point out that the technology of a gun can be used to shoot someone, or it can be used for target practice, meaning leisure or recreation. It does not matter that a gun can be used for shooting people. That does not make everyone who advocates technology involving firearms, somebody who intends to shoot people. Then you say that I admitted that I have never done any research on it, and you missed the point entirely. The reason I have not researched into machines taking over people's minds and rewriting our genetic codes is because it's not relevant to the Venus Project. That is not an application of technology that we support. Henceforth, it really doesn't matter. I don't research chemical weapons either, because we are not going to be using them. Then you play that video about Jock suggesting we need research, not opinions. It's interesting that you put up that quote, as it kind of shoots your entire argument right in the face. Everything that you are basing your horror story on is the opinion of Ray Kurzweil, None of it is proven, and is therefore not as of yet science. You go on to qualify more than once that his opinion is somehow valid because Bill Gates says so, as if that doesn't make it an opinion anymore. Bill Gates is pretty smart, but he is also not infallible. Ever hear of Windows 95? Then you take another quote out of context. This quote dealing with how computers will eventually be able to rewrite their own programming to make themselves more efficient. You will not see the quote says nothing about computers rewriting our minds, just their own programming. Again, more spin on your part and outright dishonesty. You then go on to say that Jacques Fresco is talking about the singularity when he talks about this, and then start spinning this to mean that he is talking about runaway AI. I assure you, Jacques Fresco would never suggest that we're going to install runaway AI systems or systems that are capable of running away on any, basically, or anything like that into any critical system. The idea that this will just happen on its own is still only based on theory and is not tested fact. You then go on to lie again and say that I simply wrote this off as science fiction. Until it has actually happened, can be tested, and replicated, it is still just an opinion. Runaway AI is just a theory. It has never happened, and it is distinctly possible that it never will. And it is just common sense that we are not going to be installing any such programming into any critical system. This is where you basically start writing your own story to say that we would be stupid enough to do this, and then hold us accountable for something that has not even happened yet, and that may never happen. That's the benefit of you arguing from science fiction and not science fact. You can make up whatever variables to the story you want. Then you lie again and say that I can't refute what you're saying, that I'm resorting to interrupting you or talking over top of you. I was pointing out the critical failure of your debate, and that is that you wasted 6 hours telling us about your fears based on some guy's opinion that apparently should be treated as fact solely because Bill Gates says so. Several times during the conversations you slipped and said it was fact. I noticed you didn't put any of that in your video either. When I kept repeating that he was predicting, because the point was your entire argument was based on what Ray Kurzweil was predicting. In other words, what he thinks could happen. Now, when I said you were making things up, I was referring to you theorizing about what Jacques Fresco thinks about this or what Peter thinks about this. As was also revealed in this conversation that you, of course, left out, we asked you if you had ever tried to talk to Peter or Jacques about this yourself. You admitted you had not. This is why you were making things up. You created an elaborate story about why Peter had the picture behind him and what it meant to him. You did the same thing about why Jacques recommended Kurzweil's book. You went so far as to simply ignore all of the statements in Jacques Fresco's work that contradicted your points because they did not fit your science fiction horror story. Then you go on your technophobe rant about how some people may embrace the idea of becoming cyborgs in the future. People already do. They have pacemakers, artificial hearts, etc. If you don't want one, nobody's going to force anything on you. I notice you keep leaving that part out of your spooky videos too. Then you quote someone out of context again. You emphasize only on the quote that she would like to have a chip in her brain. You conveniently leave out the rather pertinent point that the function of this chip would be that so that she could remember infinite amounts of information, not so that she could be controlled, not so that she could have her entire genetic code rewritten by some evil imaginary machine. Then you again soundbite and take her out of context, mentioning the possibility of children having chips implanted in their brains. You of course leave out that purpose of those chips would be to help with education, learning, etc. Again, more dishonesty and outright spin. You in fact you chopped the hell out of that. You basically totally clipped up what she said and just took what you wanted out of it and quoted it again. Then at 9 minutes and 9 seconds of your video, you astonish me by having the balls to simply misquote the person on the recording by putting something in a quote that is not what he was suggesting. He didn't say, "But is the end of the human race a bad thing?" He said, "But is that really a bad thing?" And the context that you, of course, were leaving out is that he is talking about immortality and our race changing and evolving to be better. That basically not our race ending as a whole, it's not extinction. Again, more lies from you. Then you quote me way out of context when I said I would like to have cybernetic feet and put up another